During a regular weekday, many students can be seen walking around the UMBC campus. One might say that UMBC is a heavily populated area. Located between the biology building and the library, there is a pond which students like to call Library Pond. Could the high population surrounding this pond have an effect on its water quality? Our group decided to test this question by taking water samples from the highly populated Library Pond and comparing them to water samples from a less populated lake, Brighton Dam. We decided that the best test to determine water quality would be pH, conductivity, turbidity, dissolved oxygen, total phosphates, and total nitrates. The UMBC Library Pond is a fairly small man-made pond that is part of the Herbert Run watershed. Occasionally ducks can be seen near the water, and there are large white and gold fish living in it. There are also 3 fountains that continuously cycle the water. Tall grass and benches surround the perimeter of the pond, and it is not uncommon to see trash in the water as well. Brighton Dam is located just 20 minutes away from UMBC campus and is part of the Paxtuant watershed. There are many ducks and geese around the dam, and the surrounding area is much less populated compared to the area around Library Pond. There are many picnic areas close to the dam, as well as a small visitor center. Overall, the dam seems to be much cleaner than Library Pond. Based on our observations, we hypothesize that Brighton Dam will have better water quality results compared to Library Pond.
To determine the water quality for each site, samples were collected on April 14, 2009 between the hours of 1 p.m. and 3 p.m. The testing took place at 3 p.m. the following day. The samples were refrigerated between collection and testing to prevent any reactions. The tests done were for dissolved oxygen, conductivity, turbidity, pH, phosphates, and nitrates. Each test was followed according to the lab handout.
For each test, the dependent variable was sample of water being tested, and the independent variable was what was being measured. For instance, the conductivity test, the dependent variable was the sample tested, and the independent variable was the amount of microsiemens observed. Each test was performed by the same person for both samples, with the exception of dissolved oxygen due to time constraints. This was done to prevent skewing.
As we begin to look at these graphs, please take note of the scale. Some graphs may look more drastic than they are. As you can see, the pH is very similar for both water sources, with Brighton Dam being slightly more basic. This is one of the more drastic results. The conductivity is much higher at Library Pond than at Brighton Dam. Surprisingly, Library Pond was less turbid than Brighton Dam. This will be explained in the discussion section. Dissolved oxygen was higher at Brighton Dam than at Library Pond. The phosphate test showed that Library Pond had just a little more phosphate than Brighton Dam. Keep in mind that the test is very subjective. The nitrate tests showed that Brighton Dam had higher levels of nitrates, but again, keep in mind that this test is subjective.
The largest difference between the 2 water sources is in the conductivity test results. Library Pond had 1,413 microsiemens, while Brighton Dam only had 153 microsiemens. What this means is that there are more charged particles in Library Pond. Typical results for inland freshwater are between 50 microsiemens and 1,500 microsiemens according to the EPA, so both bodies of water are within usual measurements. The presence of chloride, phosphates, and nitrates can raise the conductivity, but seeing as the phosphates and nitrate test results were so similar for both bodies of water, perhaps there is chloride in Library Pond. The next result of significance is the turbidity test result. Brighton Dam was 3 times as turbid as Library Pond. Turbidity is a good test for urban runoff and erosion. However, we are comparing a pond, which is still water, against a reservoir, which is flowing water. The flowing water will erode more than the still water, and thus have a higher turbidity. The test that best compares these 2 water sources is the dissolved oxygen test. Though the results are similar, Brighton Dam has slightly higher levels of dissolved oxygen, meaning it can support life slightly better. The pH test shows very similar results, a difference of only 0.3. The nitrate test shows that there are slightly more nitrates in Brighton Dam than in Library Pond. The opposite is true for the phosphate test. Both these tests are highly subjective, and the results are so close that the differences are insignificant. With these results, we accept our hypothesis that the water quality is better at the area with a lower population. It may be slight, but there is a difference. Temperature can affect some of the results, such as for conductivity and dissolved oxygen. Despite the efforts made, there was probably a difference in the temperature of the samples during testing. Because of this, our results cannot be treated as 100% accurate. More inaccuracies come from the nature of the comparison. Brighton Dam was flowing water, while Library Pond was still water. The two bodies of water are drastically different in size as well. If we were to test our hypothesis again, we would try to find a more suitable body of water with which to compare Library Pond. A body of water of similar size, elevation, still water, and geographic surroundings would be preferable. We would also gather samples over time so we could get a clearer picture of the actual water quality. It would be best to test at the site so that there could be no possibility for contamination, though that may not be possible. We would also do more tests that can tell the quality of water, such as fecal coliform tests, total solids, temperature, and biological oxygen demand. A good experiment would be to see what the correlation is between population and water quality. For instance, which tests seem directly affected by population and what trends could be discovered if multiple water sources were found, all with different populations. Would the water quality increase linearly as the population declined, or would the trend be parabolic?